Detective Sarah Chen had been a cop for 12 years, but something about late-night domestic calls still made her stomach knot. The radio crackled at 11:47 p.m. on a cold February evening in Portland, Oregon. All units, domestic disturbance reported at Riverside Apartments, 2847 MLK Boulevard, Apartment 3B, neighbors reporting screaming, sounds of things breaking, possible injuries. Sarah grabbed her jacket and nodded to her partner, not the human kind, but Max, a 4-year-old German shepherd who'd been by her side for 3 years. Max's ears perked up immediately, sensing the urgency in her movements. They'd responded to hundreds of calls together, but Max had an uncanny ability to read situations before Sarah even processed them. The apartment complex was one of those aging buildings that Portland's rapid gentrification had somehow missed. Peeling paint, flickering hallway lights, the lingering smell of old cooking oil and cigarette smoke. As Sarah climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, she could hear muffled shouting. Her hand instinctively moved to her service weapon, though she hoped she wouldn't need it. Apartment 3B's door stood slightly ajar, hanging on one hinge. Sarah's trained eyes immediately cataloged the scene: broken glass scattered across the entryway, a lamp overturned, family photos shattered on the floor, and dark drops of what was unmistakably blood leading toward the living room. The shouting had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow worse. "Portland Police, I'm coming in," Sarah announced, pushing the door fully open. Max stayed close to her left side, alert but calm, exactly as he'd been trained. Inside, the apartment looked like a tornado had torn through it. The coffee table was flipped, couch cushions thrown across the room, and in the kitchen doorway stood Derek Thompson. He was a tall man, muscular, wearing a torn white t-shirt and jeans. His knuckles were scraped and bleeding. When he saw Sarah, he immediately put his hands up, but his expression wasn't one of surrender. It was calculated, almost rehearsed. "Thank God you're here, officer," Derek said, his voice shaking with what seemed like genuine distress. "Sophia just went crazy. I don't know what happened. She started throwing things, screaming at me. I was just trying to calm her down and she attacked me. Look at my hands. I think she might need psychiatric help." Sarah had heard variations of this story 1,000 times, the perpetrator playing the victim. She didn't respond to Derek, instead moving further into the apartment. That's when she saw Sophia Martinez. The woman lay unconscious on the floor near the couch, her body crumpled in an unnatural position. Her face was badly bruised, already swelling, with blood streaming from her nose and a cut above her eye. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Sarah immediately called for paramedics while keeping her eyes on Derek. "Step back into the kitchen, sir. Keep your hands where I can see them," Sarah commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. Derek complied, but that smug look never left his face. He thought he'd gotten away with it. He thought his word against an unconscious woman's would be enough. That's when Sarah's attention was caught by something else, something that made her heart drop. A small pink sneaker, the kind with lights that flash when you walk, was barely visible behind the bedroom closet door, which stood slightly ajar. Sarah's maternal instincts, honed by her own 2 kids at home, kicked into overdrive. She moved quickly but quietly toward the bedroom, Max following. The apartment had 2 bedrooms. The master was in disarray, but the second bedroom was clearly a child's room. Princess posters on the walls, stuffed animals piled on a small bed, drawings taped everywhere. And there in the closet sat 3-year-old Emma Martinez. The little girl was pressed into the far corner, wedged between hanging clothes and shoe boxes, making herself as small as possible. Her dark curls were matted with tears and sweat. Her brown eyes were enormous, glazed with terror, staring at nothing and everything simultaneously. She wore pajamas covered in cartoon unicorns, now stained with what looked like juice she'd spilled. But what struck Sarah most was the absolute silence. The child wasn't crying, wasn't making any sound at all. She barely seemed to be breathing. "Hi, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, crouching down to the child's level but maintaining distance. My name is Sarah. I'm a police officer. You're safe now. Can you tell me your name? Nothing. Emma's eyes flickered toward Sarah but didn't focus. It was like looking at a little girl who'd mentally left her body, gone somewhere far away where the terror couldn't reach her. Sarah had been trained in trauma response, especially with children. She knew that forcing interaction could make things worse. It's okay, honey. You don't have to talk. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help. Behind her, she could hear more officers arriving, the paramedics rushing to Sophia, Derek being read his rights. But Sarah's entire focus was on this traumatized child who'd witnessed something no 3-year-old should ever see. That's when Max made his move. The German Shepherd had been sitting patiently beside Sarah, but he slowly, deliberately walked toward the closet. He'd done this before with other frightened children, other trauma victims. Max had an almost supernatural ability to sense when someone needed him. He approached the closet with his head lowered, non-threatening, his tail wagging slowly. He stopped about 2 feet from Emma and simply sat down, looking at her with those deep, understanding brown eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. Sarah held her breath, not wanting to interrupt whatever was unfolding. Then, almost imperceptibly, Emma's hand moved. Just her fingers at first, stretching out from where she'd been hugging her knees to her chest. Her fingers extended toward Max, trembling, hesitant. Max didn't move closer. He waited, patient as stone, letting Emma make the decision. Her tiny hand stretched further, until finally her fingertips touched the fur on top of Max's head. The moment she made contact, something shifted in Emma's face. The glassy, distant look began to recede, replaced by a flicker of presence, of connection. Her hand moved from his head to his neck, then she was clutching his fur with both hands, pulling herself forward. Max still didn't move, letting her come to him on her own terms. Emma crawled out of the closet and wrapped her arms around the dog's neck, burying her face in his fur. Her small body shook with silent sobs. "That's it, sweetheart. Max is a good boy. He's here to keep you safe," Sarah said softly, her own eyes stinging with tears she couldn't let fall. Not yet. Not while she was on duty. The paramedics needed to check Emma, and eventually Child Protective Services would arrive. But for now, for these precious minutes, Emma clung to Max like he was the only solid thing in a world that had just shattered around her. When they finally had to move her, when the CPS worker tried to take her to be examined, Emma wouldn't let go of Max's collar. She was pulled away screaming silently, mouth open, no sound emerging, reaching desperately for the dog. Sarah watched as Emma was carried out, and in that moment she saw Derek Thompson being led away in handcuffs. He caught Sarah's eye and had the audacity to wink, confident and arrogant. He mouthed words she could lip-read. Good luck proving anything. That's when Sarah realized the horrifying truth. Emma was the only real witness to what had happened in this apartment. Sophia was unconscious, might not even remember the attack clearly. And Emma, traumatized, silent, just 3 years old, was the only one who'd seen everything. As the ambulance carrying Sophia pulled away, as the CPS van took Emma to emergency foster care, as crime scene investigators photographed and documented everything, Sarah stood in that destroyed apartment with Max and made a silent promise. Somehow, some way, Emma would get justice. They would find a way to give that little girl her voice back. She just didn't know yet how impossible that promise would be to keep. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the small 2-bedroom apartment Sophia Martinez now called home. It was nothing like the place she'd shared with Derek. This was smaller, in a safer neighborhood, with locks on every door and window. Sophia had made sure of that. But safety, she'd learned, wasn't just about locks and security systems. Real safety was something her daughter might never feel again. Sophia stood in the doorway of Emma's bedroom, watching her daughter sleep. Even in sleep, Emma's little face was tense, her hands curled into fists clutching her stuffed bunny. 6 months had passed since that terrible night, but for Emma, it might as well have been yesterday. The nightmares came every night without fail. Emma would wake up screaming silently, her mouth open in terror but no sound emerging, her body drenched in sweat. "Good morning, baby girl," Sophia whispered, entering the room and sitting gently on the edge of the bed. Emma's eyes fluttered open, and for just a moment Sophia saw fear flash across her daughter's face before recognition set in. It broke Sophia's heart every single time. Emma sat up and reached for her mother, and Sophia pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her daughter's hair, feeling the small heartbeat against her chest. This was their morning ritual now, silent comfort, wordless reassurance. Emma hadn't spoken a single word since that night. Not one syllable, not even a whisper. The doctors had a name for it: selective mutism, triggered by severe psychological trauma. "It's not that she can't speak," Dr. Linda Ramirez, the child psychologist, had explained during their first session. "It's that her brain has essentially locked away her ability to speak as a protective mechanism. She witnessed something so terrifying that speaking about it, or speaking at all, feels dangerous to her subconscious." Sophia had asked the question that haunted her every day: will she ever talk again? Dr. Ramirez had been honest. Some children recover fully, others take years, some never fully regain their voice. Every case is different, but Emma is young, and with intensive therapy there's hope. Hope. Sophia clung to that word like a lifeline, even on days when it felt impossibly distant. Now, 6 months later, they'd been to countless therapy sessions, tried multiple therapeutic approaches: play therapy, art therapy, even music therapy. Emma would engage sometimes, would draw pictures or play with toys, but always in complete silence. She communicated through gestures and facial expressions, through drawings that often depicted that horrific night in disturbing detail. Dark, violent scribbles representing Derek, a small figure hiding, and always in the corner of her drawings a dog. Sophia got Emma ready for the day: breakfast, getting dressed, preparing for another therapy session. She'd had to quit her evening job as a restaurant server because finding childcare for a traumatized, nonverbal child was nearly impossible. Now she worked morning shifts at a diner and afternoon shifts cleaning offices, cobbling together barely enough to pay rent and medical bills. The hospital bills from that night alone had been crushing. Her face had required stitches, she'd had a concussion, 3 cracked ribs. The physical wounds had healed, but the financial ones kept bleeding. And then there were the legal bills, because Derek Thompson wasn't going away quietly. Sophia's phone buzzed as she was putting Emma's shoes on. A text from Marcus Webb, the district attorney handling Derek's case. "Need to talk. Can you call when you have a moment?" Sophia's stomach dropped. She'd been dreading this conversation. She called him back after dropping Emma off at her mother's house for the day. "Sophia, I'm going to be straight with you," Marcus said, his voice heavy with frustration. "Derek's attorney is pushing hard to get the charges reduced. They're arguing that without Emma's testimony, we don't have enough to prove aggravated assault and child endangerment." "But I testified. I told you everything that happened." Sophia's voice rose, panic creeping in. "I know, and your testimony is powerful. But Derek's lawyer, Robert Castellano, he's good. Too good. He's already planting seeds that you were the aggressor, that Derek was defending himself, that you have a history of depression and anxiety that makes you an unreliable witness." Sophia felt sick. "That's insane. Look at the medical reports. Look at my injuries compared to his scratched knuckles." "I know, Sophia, I believe you. But a jury needs to believe you beyond a reasonable doubt, and Castellano is creating doubt. He's painting Derek as a successful businessman who made a mistake getting involved with an unstable woman. He's gathered character witnesses, Derek's boss, his softball team, even his mother, all saying he's never been violent." "He was," Sophia nearly shouted. "He was violent with me for months before that night. The emotional abuse, the controlling behavior, But you never reported it," Marcus interrupted gently. "There's no paper trail, no previous police reports, no documented history. I'm not blaming you. I know why domestic violence victims don't report, but it makes building a case harder." There was a long pause. Sophia knew what was coming. "We need Emma to testify," Marcus finally said. "No," Sophia's response was immediate and fierce. "Absolutely not. She can't even speak, Marcus. How is she supposed to testify?" "That's what I need to figure out. There are precedents for this. Child witnesses who testify through other means. Video testimony, written statements, play therapy sessions that can be entered as evidence. But Sophia, Emma is the only witness who saw everything. She's the only one who can corroborate your version of events. She's 3 years old, and she's traumatized. You want to put her through more trauma." "I want to put the man who traumatized her in prison," Marcus said firmly. "Right now, we're looking at a plea deal. Maybe 3 to 5 years out in 2 with good behavior. That's not justice, Sophia." Sophia sank into a chair, feeling the weight of an impossible choice crushing down on her. Protect her daughter's fragile mental health, or pursue justice for what Derek had done to both of them. "Let me think about it," she finally whispered. "The trial is scheduled for 8 weeks from now. I need to know soon." Marcus paused, then added more gently, "I'm sorry, Sophia. I know this isn't fair. None of this is fair." After hanging up, Sophia drove to her mother's house in a daze. She found Emma in the backyard, sitting in the grass, staring at nothing. Her mother, Rosa, came out with coffee. "You look terrible, Mija. What happened?" Sophia explained about the phone call, about the impossible choice she faced. Rosa listened, her weathered face growing increasingly troubled. "That little girl has been through enough," Rosa said firmly. "She shouldn't have to relive it in front of strangers." "But what if Derek gets out in 2 years? What if he comes after us?" "Then we protect ourselves. We move, we change our names if we have to. But we don't sacrifice Emma's healing for revenge." "It's not revenge, Mama, it's justice." They were interrupted by a knock at the front door. Rosa went to answer it and returned with an unexpected visitor, Detective Sarah Chen, and with her Max. Sophia had met Detective Chen several times over the past 6 months. She checked in regularly, updated Sophia on the case, brought information about victim services. But she'd never brought Max before. "I hope you don't mind the surprise visit," Sarah said apologetically. "I heard about the prosecution's situation and I had an idea. It might sound crazy, but—" She trailed off, looking at Emma. Emma had turned at the sound of voices, and when she saw Max, something remarkable happened. Her entire face transformed. The blank, distant expression that had become her default melted away, replaced by something Sophia hadn't seen in 6 months: joy. Emma scrambled to her feet and ran toward Max. The dog, as if remembering their first meeting, sat down calmly and let Emma approach. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. Her small shoulders shook, and Sophia realized with shock that Emma was crying, actually crying with sound. Quiet whimpers and sobs emerged from her daughter's throat, the first sound she'd made in half a year. Sarah and Sophia exchanged a glance, both of them fighting their own tears. Emma pulled back from Max and looked up at him, her lips moving. Sophia held her breath, hopping, praying for words. But Emma remained silent, though her expression was more peaceful than Sophia had seen since before that terrible night. "There's something you should know," Sarah said quietly, watching Emma with Max. "In Washington state last year, they successfully used a facility dog in court to help a child testify in an abuse case. The dog stayed with the child during testimony, providing emotional support. The child was able to speak with the dog present when she couldn't before." Sophia's heart began to race. "You think?" "I think Emma trusts Max. I think he represents safety to her. And I think if we're going to ask her to find her voice again, maybe Max can help her do it." Sophia looked at her daughter, still clinging to the German Shepherd, and felt something she hadn't felt in months: hope. But hope, she knew, could be the most dangerous thing of all. Marcus Webb sat in his corner office on the 8th floor of the Multnomah County Courthouse, staring at the stack of legal precedents Detective Chen had delivered 3 days ago. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. He was too absorbed in reading about a case from King County, Washington, where a golden retriever named Elm had helped a 6-year-old testify against her abuser. Another case from Michigan involved a black lab named Justice who'd sat beside a 9-year-old boy during a murder trial. Then there was Rosie in New York, a therapy dog who'd helped dozens of children find their voices in family court. The concept wasn't completely unprecedented, but it was rare enough to be controversial, and Marcus knew that what he was about to propose would ignite a firestorm. His paralegal, Jennifer, knocked and entered with fresh coffee. "You've been in here for 6 hours straight. The cleaning crew is about to start their rounds." Marcus glanced at his watch. 10:47 p.m. "I need to draft a motion." "Tonight, Marcus, you look exhausted." "The preliminary hearing is in 5 days. If I'm going to do this, I need to do it now." He looked up at Jennifer, who'd worked with him for 8 years and knew him better than most. "Do you think I'm crazy?" "I think you're desperate," she said honestly, sitting down across from him. "Which means Derek Castellano has you worried." Robert Castellano was indeed worrying. The defense attorney was a shark in an expensive suit, known for his aggressive tactics and his ability to shred witnesses on the stand. He'd already filed 17 motions in this case, each one designed to chip away at the prosecution's position. He'd gotten Emma's drawings deemed inadmissible as hearsay. He'd gotten Sophia's previous therapy records subpoenaed, looking for anything to undermine her credibility. He was building a narrative that Sophia was an unstable, vindictive woman who'd attacked Derek first and was now using her daughter as a weapon. "I need a game changer," Marcus said, "and this might be it." "Or it might blow up in your face," Jennifer warned. "You're asking Judge Morneau to allow a police dog into her courtroom. Patricia Morneau, who once held a lawyer in contempt for having his phone vibrate during proceedings. You really think she's going to go for this?" Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Jennifer the video Detective Chen had sent. On the screen, Emma sat in her grandmother's backyard with Max. The little girl's face was peaceful, almost happy. She was petting the dog, whispering things no one could hear into his ear. "She's talking to him, Jen. Not to her mother, not to her therapist, not to anyone else. Just to that dog. If we can recreate that environment in the courtroom, maybe, just maybe, Emma can tell the jury what happened." Jennifer watched the video again, her expression softening. "That poor baby," she looked up at Marcus. "Okay, draft your motion, I'll help, but Marcus, this is going to get ugly." She had no idea how right she was. 5 days later, Marcus stood before Judge Patricia Morneau in her chambers. The judge was a formidable woman in her late 50s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, and reading glasses that she peered over when she wanted to make you feel like you were back in grade school getting scolded. Robert Castellano sat across from Marcus, looking like he'd just been told Christmas was canceled. "This is the most ridiculous thing I've encountered in 23 years of practice," he fumed. "Mr. Webb, explain to me why you believe I should allow a police dog into my courtroom," Judge Morneau said, her tone neutral but her skepticism evident. Marcus had prepared for this moment. He pulled out a thick folder. "Your Honor, I've documented 47 cases across 12 states where facility dogs have been used to support child witnesses in court. The practice has been upheld by appeals courts in Washington, Michigan, New York, and California. The legal precedent is solid." "Those cases involved facility dogs, specially trained therapy animals," Castellano interrupted. "Max is a police K-9. He's trained to bite suspects, sniff out drugs, and intimidate. There's a massive difference." "Max is also trained in victim support and has 3 years of experience working with traumatized witnesses," Marcus countered. "His certification includes therapy work. Detective Chen can provide his complete training records. Judge Morneau held up a hand for silence. The legal precedent is interesting, Mr. Webb, but my concern isn't just legal, it's practical. This child hasn't spoken in 6 months. What makes you think she'll speak in a courtroom full of strangers, even with a dog present? Your Honor, I'd like to submit a video for your consideration. Marcus connected his laptop to the chamber's monitor and played the footage Detective Chen had captured. They watched Emma with Max, how she relaxed in his presence, how she whispered to him, how her whole demeanor changed. Then Marcus played a second video, taken the same day, showing Emma at her therapy session without Max. The contrast was stark. Without the dog, Emma was withdrawn, unresponsive, locked in her trauma. With Max, she was a different child. Judge Morneau watched in silence, her expression unreadable. When the video ended, she removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Mr. Castellano, your response. Castellano stood, straightening his tie. He was a tall man with silver hair and a voice trained for persuasion. Your Honor, this is nothing more than emotional manipulation. The prosecution knows their case is weak without the child's testimony, so they're resorting to theater. A cute dog, a traumatized child. It's designed to tug at the jury's heartstrings and prejudice them against my client. The dog wouldn't be visible to the jury, Marcus interjected. We'd position Max under or beside the witness stand, out of their direct line of sight. His presence would be disclosed to the jury, but he wouldn't be a visual distraction. His presence alone is prejudicial, Castellano's voice rose. The jury, knowing there's a therapy dog for the traumatized witness, immediately paints my client as a monster. It denies him the presumption of innocence. Your client beat a woman unconscious in front of her 3-year-old daughter, Marcus shot back, his own frustration breaking through his professional demeanor. That's not presumption, that's fact. Alleged facts, Castellano roared. That's the whole point of a trial, Your Honor. The prosecution has to prove these allegations, and they can't do it without the child's testimony. And now they want to bring in a dog as a crutch because their case is falling apart. Gentlemen, enough. Judge Morneau's voice cut through the argument like a whip. Both lawyers fell silent immediately. This is my chambers, not a boxing ring. You'll both lower your voices and remember where you are. My apologies, Your Honor, they said in unison. Judge Morneau stood and walked to her window, looking out over downtown Portland. The city lights were starting to come on as evening approached. She stood there for so long that Marcus began to worry she'd forgotten they were there. Finally, she turned back. I'm going to take this motion under advisement. Mr. Webb, I want you to submit every case file you referenced, complete with appeals court decisions and any scholarly articles on the use of facility animals in court. Mr. Castellano, you'll have 72 hours to submit your counterarguments and any cases where such requests were denied or later overturned on appeal. Your Honor, Marcus began, the trial is scheduled to begin in 7 weeks. I need time to prepare Emma if. I'm aware of the timeline, Mr. Webb. You'll have my decision within 2 weeks. She looked at both lawyers sternly. And gentlemen, not a word of this to the press. If I find out either of you has leaked this to the media, I'll hold you in contempt. Are we clear? They both nodded. As Marcus gathered his materials to leave, Judge Morneau added, Mr. Webb, one more thing. Even if I allow this dog in my courtroom, that little girl still has to be willing and able to testify. Have you considered what happens if she remains silent even with the dog present? Marcus had considered it. He'd lost sleep over it. Because if Emma couldn't testify, Derek Thompson would likely walk away with a slap on the wrist. 3 to 5 years, probably out in 2. And Sophia and Emma would spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders. I have to believe she'll find her voice, Your Honor. I have to believe justice is possible. Judge Morneau's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Hope is admirable, Mr. Webb, but hope doesn't win trials. Prepare for the possibility that this might not work. As Marcus left the courthouse that evening, his phone was already buzzing with messages. Somehow, despite Judge Morneau's warning, word had gotten out. A reporter from the Oregonian wanted a statement. A local news station wanted an interview. By the time he reached his car, he had 14 missed calls. He checked the news on his phone and his heart sank. The headline on Portland's biggest news site read, "Controversial move. DA seeks to use police dog in child testimony. Critics call it courtroom circus." Below it was a photo of Max, and worse, a photo of Emma leaving a therapy session with Sophia. Someone had leaked everything. Marcus's phone rang. It was Detective Chen. "Have you seen the news?" "I'm looking at it now. This is going to be a nightmare." It gets worse. Derek's lawyer just gave a statement calling it a desperate stunt by a prosecution with no case. And there are already protesters gathering at the courthouse. Marcus felt exhausted suddenly, bone-deep tired. Protesters, already. Two groups, actually. One supporting Emma's right to have accommodations, the other calling it judicial misconduct and demanding the case be dismissed. Marcus sat in his car, watching the courthouse lights, and wondered if he just made the biggest mistake of his career. But then he thought of Emma's face in that video, the way she came alive with Max beside her, and he knew he'd make the same choice again. Justice for Emma was worth the fight. He just hoped Judge Morneau would see it that way too. The media firestorm exploded overnight. By morning, the story had gone national. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, every major outlet picked it up. Breaking. Oregon DA wants police dog to help child testify scrolled across screens from coast to coast. Social media erupted into a battlefield of opinions. Hashtags Justice for Emma and Unfair Trial began trending simultaneously. Marcus Webb arrived at the courthouse at 6:30 a.m. to find both groups of protesters already assembled, separated by police barricades, and a line of officers trying to keep the peace. On one side, domestic violence advocates held signs reading, "Let Emma speak," and "Animals heal trauma." On the other side, criminal justice reform activists waved placards declaring, "Fair trials for all and no courtroom theatrics." A reporter shoved a microphone in Marcus's face before he could reach the entrance. "Mr. Webb, is it true you're trying to use a dog to manipulate the jury?" "No comment," Marcus said, pushing past. "Are you admitting your case is too weak without the dog?" Marcus kept walking, but the questions followed him all the way to the door. Inside, his office looked like a war room. Jennifer had arrived even earlier, and she'd covered the conference table with printouts of news articles, legal briefs, and messages from both supporters and critics. "It's insane out there," she said, handing him coffee. "We've received 247 emails since last night, half calling you a hero, half calling you a disgrace to the legal profession." Marcus sank into his chair. "What about Judge Morneau? Any word?" "Nothing yet, but Castellano has been busy." Jennifer slid a tablet across the desk. "He gave 3 interviews this morning. He's painting this as a prosecutor willing to bend the rules because he can't win on merit." Marcus watched one of the interviews. Robert Castellano sat in his pristine office, looking every bit the reasonable, concerned attorney. "Look, I have sympathy for the little girl," he told the interviewer smoothly. "What she allegedly witnessed was traumatic, but we have established legal procedures for good reasons. You can't just introduce unprecedented elements into a courtroom because you're losing. What's next? Therapy ponies, emotional support peacocks. Where does it end?" The interviewer pressed him. "But Mr. Castellano, there are precedents for facility dogs in courtrooms across the country. In family court, in closed proceedings, in very limited circumstances, yes. But this is a criminal trial with serious consequences. My client deserves a fair trial, not a 3-ring circus designed to make him look like a monster before any evidence is presented. Your client is accused of beating a woman unconscious in front of her child." Castellano's expression remained sympathetic but firm. "Accused, exactly. In America, we're innocent until proven guilty, and the prosecution should have to prove guilt through evidence and testimony, not through emotional manipulation with a cute dog. Marcus turned off the tablet, feeling his frustration mounting. Castellano was good, too good. He was framing the entire debate in a way that made Marcus look like the bad guy. His phone buzzed. "Detective Sarah Chen, I need to see you now." 20 minutes later, Sarah sat across from him, and she didn't look happy. "My captain is getting pressure from the mayor's office. They're worried about the department's image. Using Max in court could set a precedent they're not sure they want." "You're kidding me." "I wish I was." There's also concern about Max's role as a working K9. If he's seen as a therapy dog, does that compromise his effectiveness on the job? Will defense attorneys start challenging his involvement in other cases? Marcus felt his carefully constructed plan crumbling. "Sarah, without Max, Emma won't testify. Without Emma's testimony, Derek walks." "I know, I'm not saying I agree with their concerns. I'm saying I'm getting squeezed from above." Sarah leaned forward. "But Marcus, I've been a cop for 12 years. I've seen a lot of bad guys, and Derek Thompson is one of the worst. He's not violent because he loses control. He's violent because he likes control. He's not sorry for what he did. He's sorry he got caught." "Then help me convince Judge Morneau." "I will. But you need to prepare for the possibility that even if she says yes, this could backfire spectacularly." The following morning, Marcus returned to Judge Morneau's chambers, this time for a formal hearing. The courtroom was packed with reporters, though Judge Morneau had banned cameras. Castellano arrived with 2 junior attorneys, all carrying boxes of files, clearly ready for war. Judge Morneau entered and everyone rose. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept much either. "Be seated. Let me be clear from the outset, this hearing is closed to the press. Anyone who leaks what happens here will face contempt charges. Am I understood?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "Mr. Castellano, I've reviewed your counterbrief. You've compiled an impressive argument against allowing facility animals in criminal trials. Would you like to summarize your main points?" Castellano stood, every inch the confident litigator. "Your Honor, my objections fall into 3 categories: legal precedent, practical concerns, and constitutional rights." He began packing, his voice measured and persuasive. "First, legal precedent. Yes, facility dogs have been used in courtrooms, but primarily in family court proceedings, dependency hearings, and civil cases. The few criminal cases that allowed them were either later overturned on appeal or involved such unique circumstances that they're not applicable here. In State v. Dye, the Washington Supreme Court ultimately ruled that while the dog's presence wasn't reversible error, it was concerning and could prejudice a defendant's right to a fair trial. Judge Morneau made notes. Continue. Second, practical concerns. Max is not a certified facility dog. He's a police K9 trained for law enforcement operations. His presence inherently suggests law enforcement has already determined my client's guilt. How can jurors remain impartial when the state literally brings its attack dog into the courtroom? That's inflammatory language, counselor, Marcus objected. It's accurate language, Castellano shot back. K9 units are specifically trained to be intimidating. That's their job. Judge Morneau held up a hand. Mr. Castellano, finish your argument. Finally, constitutional concerns. My client has the right to confront his accuser. How can he exercise that right when the accuser is flanked by a 75-pound German Shepherd? It's inherently coercive. The child's testimony, if she even provides any, will be tainted by the knowledge that she has physical protection from the bad man she's pointing at. It transforms testimony into theater. Castellano pulled out a file and approached the bench. Your Honor, I've documented 12 cases where convictions were overturned on appeal, specifically because of courtroom modifications that appeared to prejudge the defendant's guilt. special barriers, disguised witnesses, and yes, in 2 cases, therapy animals. The appeals courts ruled that these modifications, however well-intentioned, violated the defendant's constitutional right to a fair trial. He returned to his seat. I sympathize with this child's situation. Truly, I do. But we cannot sacrifice constitutional protections on the altar of sympathy. If the prosecution cannot make their case within the bounds of established legal procedure, then they do not have a case. Judge Morneau turned to Marcus. Mr. Webb, your response. Marcus stood, feeling the weight of everything riding on this moment. Your Honor, Mr. Castellano makes eloquent arguments, but he fundamentally misunderstands what we're requesting. This isn't about sympathy or theater. It's about equal access to justice. He pulled out his own file. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires courts to provide reasonable accommodations for witnesses with disabilities. Emma Martinez has a documented psychological condition, selective mutism triggered by severe trauma, that prevents her from testifying under normal circumstances. That's a disability, Your Honor. The ADA doesn't just apply to physical disabilities. Marcus walked to the center of the courtroom. We're not asking for preferential treatment. We're asking for accommodation that allows Emma to access the same justice system that serves verbal, non-traumatized witnesses every day. Without Max, Emma cannot testify. That's not manipulation. That's medical fact, supported by her psychologist, Dr. Linda Ramirez. He gestured to the back of the courtroom, where Dr. Ramirez sat. Dr. Ramirez has submitted a 20-page report documenting Emma's condition and explaining why Max's presence is not just helpful but necessary for her to access her verbal capabilities. This isn't about comfort, Your Honor. It's about access. Judge Morneau leaned forward. But Mr. Webb, what about Mr. Castellano's point regarding confrontation rights? Doesn't the dog's presence fundamentally alter that dynamic? It would if Max were visible to the jury or positioned between Emma and the defendant. We're not proposing that. Max would be beside or under the witness stand, out of the jury's direct line of sight. He would be disclosed to the jury. We're not hiding his presence, but he wouldn't be a visual element of Emma's testimony. The jury knowing he's there is enough, Castellano interjected. It still prejudices them. Then by that logic, Marcus countered, we couldn't allow wheelchair ramps because the jury might sympathize with a disabled witness. We couldn't allow sign language interpreters because they might make the jury feel sorry for a deaf witness. Accommodation is not prejudice, Your Honor. It's equality. Judge Morneau sat back, silent for a long moment. The courtroom was so quiet Marcus could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, she spoke. Here's my concern, gentlemen. I've read every case both of you have cited. I've stayed up late reading appeals court decisions and law review articles. And you know what I've learned? The law is unsettled here. For every case supporting facility dogs, there's another expressing concerns. For every successful accommodation, there's a potential constitutional violation lurking in the shadows. She removed her glasses and looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Webb, I'm inclined to allow this. The Ada argument is compelling, and I believe Emma deserves the chance to be heard. But, she held up a finger, I need to see proof that this will actually work. I will not turn my courtroom into an experiment. Marcus's heart raced. What do you need, Your Honor? I want to see Emma with the dog. I want her psychologist present. I want to witness firsthand whether this child can actually testify with Max present or whether this is wishful thinking. If she can demonstrate the ability to answer questions, real questions, not just whispers to a dog, then I'll make my final ruling. Castellano stood. Your Honor, I object. This is highly irregular. Your objection is noted and overruled. This entire situation is irregular, Mr. Castellano. Judge Morneau looked at both attorneys. We'll convene in my chambers 1 week from today. Mr. Webb, you'll bring Emma, her mother, her psychologist, and the dog. Mr. Castellano, you'll be present to observe and ensure fairness. I'll conduct a limited, age-appropriate interview. If Emma can answer basic questions with the dog present, I'll allow Max in the courtroom for trial. If she cannot, this discussion is over." She banged her gavel. "1 week, gentlemen. Let's see if hope meets reality." As the courtroom emptied, Marcus felt simultaneously elated and terrified. He had his chance. Now he just had to pray that a traumatized 3-year-old and a German shepherd could somehow deliver a miracle. The morning of the trial arrived like an executioner's footsteps, inevitable, terrifying, final. Sophia woke at 4:30 a.m., having barely slept. In the next room, she could hear Emma whimpering through another nightmare. She rushed in to find her daughter sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face, arms reaching out desperately. "I'm here, baby. Mommy's here," Sophia whispered, pulling Emma close. The little girl's heart was racing, her pajamas soaked with sweat. "We don't have to do this. We can stay home. We can." But Emma shook her head firmly. Over the past 2 weeks, something had shifted in her daughter. After that day in Judge Morneau's chambers, when Emma had whispered answers to simple questions while holding onto Max, the little girl had made a decision. She couldn't explain it in words, but her determination was clear. She wanted to face the bad man. She wanted to tell the truth. Dr. Ramirez had warned Sophia that this resolve might crumble when Emma actually entered the courtroom. "Trauma isn't linear," she'd explained. "Emma might feel brave right now, but when she sees Derek, when she's surrounded by strangers, her brain might shut down again to protect her. We have to be prepared for that." Now, as Sophia helped Emma into the special dress they'd chosen together, soft blue cotton with small white flowers, comfortable and not too formal, she prayed her daughter's courage would hold. Emma stood quietly as Sophia brushed her dark curls, her small face serious beyond her years. "You're the bravest person I know," Sophia told her daughter, kissing the top of her head. Emma looked up at her mother and did something remarkable. She smiled. It was small and trembling, but it was real. They arrived at the courthouse at 8:15 a.m. The scene outside was chaotic. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like mechanical flowers seeking sun. Reporters stood in clusters, speaking into cameras. The protesters had multiplied since the story broke, at least 200 people now, their chants echoing off the courthouse walls. "Justice for Emma, justice for Emma. Fair trials matter, stop the circus." Detective Sarah Chen met them at a side entrance, with Max on a tight leash. The German shepherd's tail began wagging the moment he saw Emma. The little girl's entire face lit up, and she ran to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. Max stood perfectly still, accepting her embrace with the patience of a saint. "Ready?" Sarah asked Sophia gently. Sophia wasn't sure she'd ever be ready, but she nodded anyway. They entered through a private corridor, avoiding the crowds. Marcus Webb met them outside the courtroom, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past 2 weeks. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his tie was slightly crooked, unlike the perfectly polished DA Sophia had first met. "How is she?" he asked quietly, watching Emma with Max. "Scared, determined, I honestly don't know." Sophia's hands shook as she clutched her purse. "Marcus, what if she freezes? What if Derek wins because my baby can't speak?" "Then we live with it and keep her safe another way," Marcus said firmly. "But Sophia, I've seen something in Emma these past 2 weeks. She wants this. She wants to be heard. Let's give her that chance." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Every seat was filled. Journalists packed the gallery, their pens poised over notebooks. Domestic violence advocates sat behind the prosecution table, wearing purple ribbons. Derek Thompson's supporters, his mother, his boss, friends from his softball league, occupied seats behind the defense table, their faces set in expressions of righteous indignation. And there at the defense table sat Derek Thompson himself. Sophia's breath caught when she saw him. He transformed since his arrest. Gone was the angry, violent man from that terrible night. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his face clean-shaven. He looked like a banker or a teacher, respectable, harmless, even kind. His lawyers had done their job well. Derek's eyes found Sophia, and for just a moment his mask slipped. She saw the cold calculation there, the contempt, the absolute certainty that he would win. Then he looked away, his expression returning to one of wounded innocence. Judge Patricia Morneau entered, and everyone rose. She surveyed her courtroom with an expression that dared anyone to step out of line. "Be seated. Before we begin, I want to address the unprecedented nature of these proceedings. As you're all aware, I've made the decision to allow a facility animal, specifically K9 Max, to be present during portions of this trial." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Morneau's gavel cracked down. "Order! My ruling stands, and I will not tolerate any disruption. The dog will be present solely as an accommodation under the ADA for a witness with documented special needs. Anyone who has a problem with my ruling can take it up with the appeals court after we're done here. Are we clear?" Silence answered her. "Good, Mr. Webb, call your first witness." The morning proceeded with technical testimony, police officers describing the crime scene, paramedics detailing Sophia's injuries, forensic experts presenting photographs and evidence. It was dry, procedural, necessary, but everyone knew what they were really waiting for. At 1:45 p.m., after the lunch recess, Marcus stood. His voice was steady despite his racing heart. "Your Honor, the prosecution calls Sophia Martinez to the stand." Sophia walked to the witness box on trembling legs. She'd practiced her testimony a dozen times with Marcus, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of sitting here, with Derek's cold eyes boring into her, with 200 strangers watching her every move. She told her story as clearly as she could, the months of emotional abuse, the escalating violence, that final, terrible night. Her voice broke when she described regaining consciousness in the hospital and learning that Emma had witnessed everything. Then came Robert Castellano's cross-examination. He was surgical in his precision, slicing away at her credibility piece by piece. "Ms. Martinez, you were taking anti-anxiety medication at the time of the alleged incident, correct?" "Yes, but—" "Just yes or no, please. And you'd consumed alcohol that evening." "1 glass of wine with dinner, but—" "You were fired from a previous job for calling in sick too often, weren't you?" "I was dealing with Derek's abuse, I was." "Just answer the question, yes or no." It went on like this for 90 excruciating minutes. By the time Castellano finished, Sophia felt like she'd been stripped bare, her entire life examined and found wanting. She caught Emma's eye as she left the stand. Her daughter sat in the front row between Dr. Ramirez and Sarah Chen, with Max at her feet. Emma's expression was frightened but resolute. Judge Morneau looked at the clock. 3:47 p.m. "Mr. Webb, your next witness." Marcus stood, and the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. "Your Honor, the prosecution calls Emma Martinez to the stand." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Morneau's gavel rang out. "Order! I will clear this courtroom if necessary." Sarah Chen stood and took Max's leash. Dr. Ramirez took Emma's hand. Together, they walked toward the witness stand. Emma looked impossibly small as she moved down the aisle. She wore white sneakers that lit up with each step, pink and purple lights flashing, a small bit of childhood innocence in this adult world of judgment and consequence. Every eye in the courtroom was on her. Camera shutters clicked despite the judge's ban on photography. Reporters would be held in contempt later, but right now, they couldn't resist capturing this moment. A court clerk had set up a special platform earlier, raising the witness chair so Emma could sit at an appropriate height. The purple booster seat looked absurd and heartbreaking in the formal witness box. Max was positioned beside the stand, just out of the jury's direct sightline, but close enough for Emma to reach him. Emma climbed onto the booster seat with Dr. Ramirez's help. Her legs dangled, not reaching the ground. Her hands gripped the edge of the chair, knuckles white. Sarah positioned Max perfectly, and the dog immediately lay down, his head resting on his paws, his eyes on Emma. Judge Morno's voice was gentler than anyone had heard it all day. "Hello, Emma. My name is Judge Morno. Do you know why you're here today?" Emma's eyes were huge. She stared at the judge, then at the packed courtroom, then at the jury. 12 faces looking at her with expressions ranging from sympathy to curiosity to skepticism. Her breathing quickened. Her small chest began to rise and fall rapidly, the beginning of a panic attack. "Emma, sweetheart, it's okay," Judge Morno said softly. "Take your time, there's no rush." But Emma was freezing. Sophia could see it happening, her daughter retreating into herself, going to that place where words couldn't reach her. Sophia's heart shattered. This was too much. They'd asked too much of a traumatized 3-year-old. Marcus felt his case slipping away. Castellano sat at the defense table, not even trying to hide his satisfied smile. Then Emma's hand moved. It dropped down from the chair's edge, searching, reaching. Her small fingers found Max's fur and curled into it desperately. The dog pressed closer, not moving otherwise, just offering his solid, warm presence. Emma took a shuddering breath, then another. Her fingers worked through Max's fur and slowly, so slowly, her breathing began to stabilize. She looked down at Max and the dog looked back at her with those calm, patient brown eyes that seemed to say, "You can do this. I'm here. You're safe." Emma's head turned. Her gaze moved across the courtroom, past the jury, past the lawyers' tables, until it landed on Derek Thompson sitting at the defense table. And in that moment, everything changed. The fear in Emma's face transformed into something else, recognition, then anger, then a determination that seemed impossibly strong for someone so small. Derek's confident expression faltered slightly. He hadn't expected this tiny child to look at him with such clear, accusatory eyes. Emma's finger rose, slowly, deliberately. She pointed directly at Derek Thompson. The courtroom went completely, utterly silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Even Judge Morno sat frozen, watching this 3-year-old girl point at her mother's attacker. Emma's lips parted. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper, but in the absolute silence of the courtroom, every single person heard her clearly. "Bad man." 2 words, just 2 words, but they landed like thunder. "He hurt Mommy." Courtroom remained suspended in that breathless moment. Emma's finger still pointed at Derek Thompson, those 2 devastating words, "bad man," hanging in the air like an indictment handed down from heaven itself. Marcus Webb felt his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. This was it. Everything hinged on what happened in the next few minutes. Judge Morno leaned forward slightly, her voice impossibly gentle. "Emma, can you tell us what you saw that night? Take your time, sweetheart. There's no rush." Emma's hand never left Max's fur. Her fingers worked through it continuously, drawing strength from the connection. She took a shaky breath, her eyes still locked on Derek, as if looking away might make her lose her nerve. "I was in my room," Emma began, her voice small but clear. "Playing with my dollies, I heard yelling, loud yelling. The bad man was yelling at Mommy." Sophia pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. This was the first time Emma had spoken about that night, the first time she'd given voice to the nightmare that had stolen her words for 6 months. "What happened next, Emma?" Judge Morno asked softly. "I got scared. Mommy was crying. She said, 'Stop, please stop.' But the bad man didn't stop." Emma's voice wavered, but she continued, her grip on Max tightening. "I opened my door a little bit, just a little bit to see. Mommy was on the floor, the bad man was." She struggled to find words a 3-year-old could grasp. He was hurting her, hitting her, kicking her. Several jurors wiped their eyes. One woman in the front row openly sobbed, quickly muffling it with her hand. "I wanted to help Mommy, but I was too scared. I ran to my closet and hid. I hid with my bunny, and I was very, very quiet because I thought maybe the bad man would hurt me too. Marcus watched Derek. The man's face had gone pale, his jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped. His carefully constructed mask of innocent victimhood was cracking. Robert Castellano stood. "Your Honor, I object. The child is clearly being coached. Her terminology, her." "Sit down, Mr. Castellano." Judge Morno's voice was ice. "The witness is answering questions in her own words. Your objection is overruled. You'll have your chance for cross-examination." Castellano sat, but his expression was furious. Marcus approached the witness stand carefully, keeping his distance so as not to intimidate Emma. "Emma, did the bad man see you?" Emma shook her head vigorously. "No, I was very quiet like a mouse, but I could hear everything. The bad man said mean words. He said Mommy was stupid. He said she was." Emma paused, clearly struggling with adult language she'd heard but didn't fully understand. "He said she was nothing without him. Then I heard a big crash and Mommy didn't talk anymore. She was quiet, too quiet." "What did you do then?" Marcus asked. "I stayed in my closet for a long, long time. I was so scared. I thought maybe Mommy was dead." Her voice broke on that last word and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I thought the bad man killed my Mommy." The courtroom was utterly silent except for the sound of muffled crying. Even some of the court officers wiped their eyes. But then the nice policeman came, and Max came. Emma looked down at the dog, and for the first time since she'd started testifying, she smiled. "Max is a good dog. He's a hero dog. He made me feel safe when I was scared. He helped me come out of the closet." Marcus glanced at the jury. Every single face showed the same thing: belief, sympathy, and growing anger at Derek Thompson. But he needed to seal this. He needed Emma to be absolutely clear about what she'd witnessed. "Emma, I need to ask you something important. The man you're pointing at, the man you're calling the bad man, can you describe what he looked like that night?" Emma studied Derek, her small face scrunched in concentration. "He had a white shirt. It had red on it, blood from Mommy. He had angry eyes, very angry, and he was big, so big, like a monster." "Is that the same man sitting over there?" Marcus pointed at Derek. "The man at that table?" Emma nodded emphatically. "Yes, that's the bad man. That's the man who hurt Mommy. I remember his face. I remember his angry face." Her voice grew stronger with certainty. "He pretends to be nice now, but I remember everything." Marcus returned to his table. "No further questions, Your Honor." Now came the moment everyone had been dreading: Robert Castellano's cross-examination. The defense attorney stood slowly, and Marcus could see him recalculating his strategy. Attacking a 3-year-old who'd just given such compelling testimony would backfire spectacularly. But Castellano hadn't built his career on being timid. He approached Emma carefully, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Hi, Emma. My name is Mr. Castellano. I just want to ask you a few questions, okay?" Emma's hand tightened on Max. She didn't respond, just watched Castellano with wary eyes. "Emma, you said you were in your closet with the door closed, right?" "A little bit open," Emma corrected. "I opened it a little bit to see." "But it was dark, wasn't it? Your room was dark." Emma nodded, "Yes." "And you were scared, so maybe you didn't see everything exactly right. Maybe you got confused." "I wasn't confused," Emma said firmly. "I saw the bad man hurt Mommy." Castellano tried another angle. "Emma, your Mommy loves you very much, doesn't she?" "Yes." "And you love your Mommy?" "Yes." "And you want to help your Mommy if she asked you to, right? Even if it meant saying things that maybe weren't exactly true." Marcus shot to his feet. "Objection. He's leading the witness and implying coaching." "Sustained. Mr. Castellano, rephrase or move on." Castellano's jaw tightened. He was losing and he knew it. "Emma, do you know what it means to tell the truth?" "Yes, the truth is what really happened, not pretend." "And you're telling the truth right now?" Emma looked directly at Castellano and her voice was clear and certain. "Yes, I'm telling the truth. The bad man hurt my mommy. I saw it. I was there." She pointed at Derek again. "He did it, and he's lying when he says he didn't." Castellano stood there for a moment, and Marcus could see the man's internal struggle. Every question he asked was just reinforcing Emma's testimony, making her more credible, more sympathetic. Finally, he said, "No further questions." As Castellano returned to his seat, Derek grabbed his arm and hissed something Marcus couldn't hear, but the lawyer shook his head firmly. Whatever defense Derek wanted to mount, Castellano knew it would only make things worse. Judge Morneau looked at Emma with something that might have been pride. "Emma, you did a very brave thing today. Thank you for telling us what happened. You can step down now." Dr. Ramirez came forward to help Emma down from the witness stand. As the little girl passed the jury box, she stopped and looked at each juror in turn, as if memorizing their faces, as if making sure they understood the weight of what she'd told them. Then she walked back to where Sophia sat and mother and daughter embraced, both of them crying. But this time they were tears of relief, of release, of finally being heard. The trial continued for 2 more days with expert witnesses, character testimony, and closing arguments. But everyone in that courtroom knew the truth. The trial had effectively ended the moment Emma found her voice. The jury deliberated for just 90 minutes. When they returned, the foreman stood, and his voice was firm and clear. "We, the jury, find the defendant Derek Thompson guilty of aggravated assault in the first degree, guilty of child endangerment in the first degree, guilty of domestic violence in the first degree." Derek's face crumbled as each verdict was read. His mother sobbed behind him. His supporters sat in stunned silence. But in the gallery, a different sound rose: applause. It started with one person, then spread like wildfire through the courtroom. Judge Morneau should have shut it down, should have demanded order, but instead she let it continue for just a moment. Even justice needs to breathe sometimes. As the bailiffs led Derek away in handcuffs, he turned and looked back at Emma. The little girl sat in her mother's lap, and when Derek's eyes met hers, she didn't look away. She stared right back at him, no longer the terrified child hiding in a closet. She was Emma Martinez, survivor, truth-teller, brave beyond measure. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed, but Marcus held up a hand. "I'll make a brief statement, but then I'm asking you to respect this family's privacy. They've been through enough." Cameras flashed as he spoke. Today, a 3-year-old girl did what many adults struggle to do. She faced her fears and spoke her truth. Emma Martinez is a hero. Her mother, Sophia, is a hero. And Max, he gestured to where Sarah Chen stood with the German Shepherd, Emma petting him happily. Max is a hero. This case demonstrates that justice sometimes requires us to think differently, to accommodate those who need support to access the same rights we all deserve. A reporter called out, "Will this set a precedent for other cases?" "I hope so," Marcus said firmly. "I hope that other courts see what happened here and recognize that healing and justice can go hand in hand. That sometimes a child needs a 4-legged friend to help them find their voice. And that voice, no matter how small, deserves to be heard." As the cameras continued to flash and questions continued to be shouted, Marcus looked over at Sophia and Emma. The little girl had her arms around Max's neck, whispering something into the dog's ear. Whatever she was saying, it made her smile. A real, genuine smile, the kind that had been missing for 6 long months. In that moment, Marcus knew that regardless of whatever appeals Castellano might file, regardless of whatever controversy this case might continue to generate, they'd done the right thing. They'd given a voiceless child her voice back. And that voice had spoken truth that no appeal could ever overturn. 3 weeks after the verdict, Derek Thompson stood before Judge Patricia Morneau for sentencing. The courtroom was once again packed, but the atmosphere was different now, quieter, more solemn. This wasn't about determining guilt anymore. This was about determining consequences. Derek wore an orange jumpsuit, his hands shackled. Gone was the expensive suit, the carefully groomed appearance. He looked older now, diminished somehow, as if the guilty verdict had physically shrunk him. His mother sat in the front row behind the defense table, her face ravaged by grief and denial. Judge Morneau reviewed the sentencing guidelines, the pre-sentence investigation report, and the victim impact statements. "Mr. Thompson, you've been convicted of 3 serious felonies. Before I pronounce sentence, does the victim wish to make a statement?" Sophia stood, her hands trembling as she held a piece of paper covered with her handwriting. She'd revised it a dozen times, trying to find the right words. Emma sat beside her grandmother Rosa in the gallery, watching with solemn eyes. "Your Honor," Sophia began, her voice shaky but growing stronger, "for 2 years I lived in fear. Fear of Derek's temper, fear of his fists, fear of what he might do if I tried to leave. He told me I was worthless, that no one would believe me, that I deserved everything he did to me. And I almost believed him." She looked directly at Derek. "But you made a mistake that night. You hurt me in front of my daughter, and that little girl, that brave, beautiful 3-year-old, she saw everything. You thought she was too young, too traumatized, too scared to tell anyone. You thought you'd silence both of us forever." Sophia's voice cracked, but she continued. "You broke my ribs, my face, my sense of safety, but you couldn't break my daughter's spirit." Emma found her voice, and with it, she found justice, not just for me, but for herself, and for every other victim who's too afraid to speak. Tears streamed down her face now. "I hope you spend every day of your sentence thinking about what you've done. Not just to me, but to a 3-year-old child who now has nightmares, who flinches at loud noises, who had to relearn how to trust the world. That's your legacy, Derek. That's what you've left behind." She sat down, and Rosa immediately wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Judge Morneau turned to Derek. "Mr. Thompson, do you wish to address the court?" Derek stood slowly. His attorney had clearly coached him. Remorse and humility were his only play now. "Your Honor, I made terrible mistakes. I lost control of my anger and I hurt someone I cared about. I'm deeply sorry for what happened to Sophia and Emma. I hope that someday they can forgive me." The words sounded hollow, rehearsed. Judge Morneau's expression suggested she heard the same emptiness Sophia did. "Mr. Thompson, I've presided over thousands of cases in my career," Judge Morneau said, removing her glasses and fixing Derek with a hard stare. "I've heard every excuse, every justification, every hollow apology imaginable. What I just heard from you was not genuine remorse. It was self-pity dressed up as contrition." Derek's face flushed red. "What you did wasn't losing control," Judge Morneau continued, her voice sharp as a blade. "Domestic violence is about power and control. You systematically terrorized Sophia Martinez for years, culminating in a brutal assault that left her unconscious and bleeding, while her 3-year-old daughter hid in a closet in terror. That child will carry those scars for the rest of her life because of your choices." She put her glasses back on and reviewed the sentencing documents. "The sentencing guidelines recommend 8 to 12 years. I'm sentencing you to the maximum, 12 years in state prison on the aggravated assault charge, 4 years on the child endangerment charge, and 3 years on the domestic violence charge. These sentences will run consecutively, not concurrently. That's a total of 19 years. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Derek's mother cried out. Castellano looked shocked. Consecutive sentences were rare, usually reserved for the most egregious cases. "Furthermore," Judge Morneau continued, "upon release, you will be subject to lifetime registration as a domestic violence offender. You will be prohibited from contacting Sophia or Emma Martinez in any way, directly or indirectly, for the rest of your life. Violation of this order will result in immediate reincarceration." She banged her gavel. "Court is adjourned. Bailiff, remove the defendant." As Derek was led away, He turned and tried to catch Sophia's eye, perhaps hopping for some sign of the woman he'd once controlled. But Sophia was looking at Emma, at her daughter who'd found the courage to speak truth to power. Derek Thompson was already irrelevant to their story. 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, the Portland Police Department held a special ceremony in Chapman Square downtown. A small stage had been erected, decorated with blue and white ribbons. Media cameras lined the perimeter, but this time their presence felt celebratory rather than invasive. Emma sat in the front row, wearing a purple dress covered in embroidered flowers. She was 4 now, having celebrated her birthday quietly at home with cake and balloons and, of course, Max. The German Shepherd sat beside her chair, his official K9 vest gleaming in the sunlight. Chief of Police Margaret Sullivan stood at the podium. Today we're here to honor an officer who exemplifies the very best of what it means to serve and protect. K9, Max, has served the Portland Police Department for 5 years with distinction. He's helped apprehend dangerous suspects, detected narcotics, and assisted in countless investigations. But his most important work may have been helping a frightened little girl find her voice. The audience applauded. Emma beamed, petting Max's head. K9 Max is retiring from active duty today, Chief Sullivan continued. He's earned his rest, but his legacy will continue. Because of Max and because of Emma's courage, the Portland Police Department is launching a new courthouse facility dog program. We're partnering with local organizations to train and deploy dogs specifically for helping traumatized witnesses, particularly children, access justice. She gestured to a row of 5 German Shepherds sitting calmly with their handlers. Meet the first class of facility K9s. They'll be available to support witnesses throughout the judicial process, from initial interviews through trial testimony. This program wouldn't exist without the precedent set in Emma's case. More applause. Sophia wiped tears from her eyes. And now, Chief Sullivan said, I'd like to invite Emma Martinez to the stage to present Max with his retirement medal. Detective Sarah Chen helped Emma up the stairs to the stage. The little girl carried a medal on a blue ribbon, a bronze disc engraved with Max's name and years of service. She walked to the podium, and someone adjusted the microphone down to her height. Emma looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces, cameras, reporters, and for a moment Sarah worried she might freeze. But Emma had come a long way in 6 months. Therapy was helping. Her nightmares were less frequent. She'd started preschool and made friends. Most importantly, she was talking now, not just whispers but real conversations, laughter, questions, all the beautiful noise a 4-year-old should make. Emma cleared her throat, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the square. Max is my hero. When I was very scared and couldn't talk, Max helped me. He stayed with me and made me feel safe. He helped me be brave. She knelt down and placed the medal around Max's neck. The dog sat perfectly still, though his tail wagged slightly. Emma wrapped her arms around him. Thank you for saving me, Max. You're the best dog in the whole world. The crowd erupted in applause. There wasn't a dry eye in the square. Later, after the ceremony ended and the cameras finally left, Sophia signed the final adoption papers. Max was officially theirs, no longer a police K9, but a family dog, a companion, a guardian angel with 4 legs and a wagging tail. They walked home together through the city streets, Emma holding Max's leash proudly, Sophia walking beside them with her hand on her daughter's shoulder. They'd found a new apartment in a better neighborhood. Sophia had gotten a full-time job with benefits at a nonprofit supporting domestic violence survivors. She'd even started dadding again, cautiously, taking things slow. But more than any of that, they'd found something precious that Derek had tried to take from them. Their voices, their agency, their right to tell their own story. That evening, as Sophia tucked Emma into bed, her daughter looked up at her with those serious brown eyes. Mommy, can I tell you something? Of course, baby, anything. I'm not scared anymore, not like I used to be. Emma glanced at Max, who'd taken up his usual position at the foot of her bed. Max taught me that even when scary things happen, you can still be brave. You just need someone good beside you. Sophia kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in the scent of her lavender shampoo, feeling the steady beat of her heart. You taught me that too, baby. You're the bravest person I know. As Sophia turned off the light and closed the door, she heard Emma whisper one more thing to Max. "Good night, hero dog. Thank you for helping me find my voice." A year later, Emma's story had sparked a national movement. 15 states had enacted or expanded courthouse facility dog programs. The Emma's Law Initiative, championed by domestic violence advocates, made it easier for traumatized child witnesses to access accommodations during testimony. Emma herself had become an unlikely advocate. She visited animal shelters with Sophia, reading to rescue dogs, helping other scared children learn that animals could be healers and friends. She was interviewed, gently, age-appropriately, for several news programs about her experience. But her favorite activity was visiting the Portland Police Training Facility, where new facility K-9s were being trained. She'd sit with the dogs, talk to them, tell them about their important job. "You're going to help kids like me," she'd tell each dog solemnly. "Kids who are scared and can't talk. You're going to be their hero, just like Max was mine. You have to be very gentle and very patient and very brave." The trainers said the dogs seemed to understand her, seemed to sense the weight of their responsibility. On the second anniversary of that terrible night, Sophia and Emma did something they'd planned for months. They stood before Portland City Council and proposed a permanent memorial in Chapman Square, a bronze statue of a child with a dog, dedicated to all survivors of domestic violence who'd found the courage to speak. The proposal passed unanimously. 2 years after that, the statue was unveiled. It showed a small girl standing beside a sitting German shepherd, her hand resting on his head, her face turned upward toward the sky. The inscription read, "In honor of all who find their voice through courage, support, and love, may we always listen when the vulnerable speak. May we always provide the help they need to be heard." Emma, now 8 years old and thriving in 3rd grade, stood beside the statue with Max, now gray-muzzled and slower, but still her constant companion. Reporters asked her how it felt to have inspired so much change. Emma thought about it carefully, then smiled. "I'm just glad other kids won't have to be as scared as I was. I'm glad they'll have dogs to help them, like Max helped me. And I'm glad that grown-ups are finally listening when kids try to tell them the truth." She knelt beside Max, hugging him one more time for the cameras. "Max taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared, but you speak up anyway. Everyone can be brave. Everyone can find their voice. Sometimes you just need a really good friend to help you find it." As the sun set over Portland that evening, casting golden light across the new statue, Sophia watched her daughter play in the park with Max, laughing and running and being beautifully, wonderfully, loudly alive. Derek Thompson sat in a prison cell, beginning year 3 of his 19-year sentence. His appeals had all been denied. And Emma Martinez, the 3-year-old who'd pointed at evil and called it what it was, had grown into a voice for the voiceless, a beacon for the brave, living proof that justice, though sometimes delayed, could still prevail. Her voice, once stolen by trauma, now sang with strength. And she would never be silenced again. The end.